Chapter 37. Do not abandon the state of Tajrīd. Before coming to us, you were in search of Al-Haq, the truth. You sought to understand and realize the secret that flows within you. You wanted to know the one who created you and disappear into his love and presence. This inner search led you to us, because you recognized in us the door through which you could access the city of knowledge and ascend to the lordly presence. You committed yourself to us through the bay'ah, the pledge of allegiance. Through it, God cast light into your heart, and we provided you with the weapons with which you can advance on your spiritual journey. These weapons are those of spiritual courtesy, adab, and they are far more powerful than conventional weapons, for they will enable you to combat the veil of your nafs in order to raise yourself towards the presence of Al-Haq. You must therefore know, dear disciple, that if you wish to orient yourself fully towards the light of the heavens and the earth, and if you wish to emerge victorious from the battle of your life, then you must never abandon these weapons which allow you to remain in the state of tajrīd, the state of disengagement from other than God. And what are these weapons? They are the muraqqa, the patched cloak, the subha, prayer beads around the neck, the staff, the sandals, as well as the shawl, and they are what characterize the angels. This is how we recognize people affiliated with the prophetic household, Ahlul Bayt, and this is how we recognize people of high spiritual degrees, and those engaged in inner struggle, in mujahada. All these characteristics are present in our blessed path, except for the staff, which is exclusive. Indeed, only one who undertakes a siyaha, a spiritual journey, may carry it. It symbolizes what we call in this tariqah the alif al-muqaddar, the hidden alif. The disciple who receives it is asked to stay in the front and lead his brothers in the siyaha, because holding the staff actually means grasping the nafs in one's hands. Be sure to remain in the state of tajrīd, keeping the weapons of the way that we have given you, especially the essential muraqqa. This tool of tarbiyah, of spiritual education, is extraordinary, and only those whose hearts are blind turn away from it. The disciple must keep his muraqqa, and he cannot remove it without permission. Shaykh Buzidi himself speaks of this, telling us, only one who has received a command from the truth, al-haq, while engaged in dhikrullah, will be able to remove the muraqqa while remaining in a state of tajrīd. Nevertheless, he must continue to wear the clothes of Ahlullah, the people of God. It is as if he is telling us that the status of Sayyid, the status of master, can only be achieved by wearing the patched cloak. It is as if he is telling us that tajrīd necessarily involves clothing oneself in the muraqqa. And even when he tells us that the murid could remove it by divine permission, this does not mean he will remove it in order to dress in a fine suit. No. He specifies that one must still keep the clothes of the Ahlullah, meaning clothes of piety. What does this mean? In our tariqah, we have two types of muraqqa. First, we have what we call the darbala. This is the true patched cloak of the Sufis, the garment of the people of God. It is made of various fabric pieces recovered from garbage and sewn by hand. This ragged garment is hard for the traveler to wear because it truly breaks his nafs. This is why we have established another type of muraqqa, which is much simpler to wear and often serves as training before wearing the darbala. This second type of muraqqa is a jallaba that resembles a perfect machine-sewn, multicolored checkerboard. The colored squares that compose it are of the same material and size. It is therefore much easier for the seeker to wear, as people who see it might imagine it to be a fashionable outfit. There are thus two types of muraqqa with which the disciple can clothe himself according to his spiritual strength. They are a mercy for him because they allow him to purify his soul. This is why the sincere disciple places such high importance on his patched cloak, to the point that if it were taken from him, you would see him sink into sadness and affliction. If for one reason or another, Allah Azza wa Jal permitted him to remove it, the faqir should still keep the other elements that mark him as a Karkari disciple and reveal his state of tajrīd. This is what some of our disciples do who are certain in this path, who are satisfied with their station but no longer wish to advance in their path. Understand this. These people must make sure to keep their prayer beads around their necks and not spend too much time with the common people. This is in order to preserve their hearts from inclining towards the love of the here below, the dunya. This is where some disciples exclaim, "But I speak to people as dawah for them." If you truly want to call them to God and to the vision of the light, you do not need to discuss and debate for hours. For one who is in search of the truth, it will be enough to speak to them for a few moments about the light, so that their heart remembers this fitrah and they begin to tremble with love for their Lord. If you truly want to call them to God, then you should write poems that describe the states of presence to which you wish to call them to. Write verses in which you allow the fragrance of divine love to appear, with allusions to subtle realities. This is how you can touch hearts without having to speak at length, because in reality, your words can only be understood by someone who is like you. Let us return to Tajrīd in the Tariqah. There are two types. There is the Tajrīd which descends from the hidden to the apparent. In other words, the seeker receives the light of God, which purifies his heart. This inner illumination gradually leads him to disengage from other than God on the external level. He wears prayer beads around his neck, clothes himself in the patch cloak, and all the other signs of the tajreed of the nafs. This is a true gift from God, which he grants to whomever he wishes, and which draws the disciple into the path of God. The other type of tajreed is opposite to the previous one. It is a tajreed that begins externally. The disciple will not receive the light immediately, but will begin with the pledge of blessings, the bayat tabarruk. He will then follow external practices to try to disengage himself from other than God, by performing the wird tabarruk, the daily litany of blessings, or by wearing the muraqqa. Through these practices, he will see this external tajreed manifest in his heart through the manifestation of the light in his heart. The Sufi path is both an internal and external tajreed. It is the way of the prophets and messengers, and it is a sunnah of our beloved ﷺ, since it is the very principle of religion, to disengage oneself from everything in order to return to God. If you are among those who seek to follow the Muhammadan example, then ardently seek this tajreed. If you observe the lives of the prophets, you will realize that they all renounce this world and its illusory adornments. As for this colorful patch cloak that you mock and denigrate, you should realize that it is a true prophetic sunnah, since the first to wear it was none other than the first prophet sent to earth, Sayyidina Adam alayhi salam. He was the first to sew the leaves of paradise together until he fashioned the first muraqqa. In following the example of the prophets and messengers, you must abandon, both externally and internally, the beauty of this ephemeral world and everything that can distract you from the divine presence. This is sincerity, ikhlas. Refusing to abandon this world and its riches for God is a clear sign of distance from the divine. If this is your situation, then do not claim to be among the people of Allah. Understand what we are telling you. God says, "Say, who has forbidden the adornment of God, which he has brought forth for his servants, and the good things among his provision? Say, these are for those who believe in the life of this world, and on the day of resurrection they are for them alone. Thus do we expound the signs for a people who know." Here your nafs will surely whisper to you that by the word adornment, God means beautiful clothes. But don't you think that renunciation of this worldly life is the most beautiful adornment for the believer? Reflect on this. Do you think that God's messengers were preoccupied with pursuing this worldly life? No, of course not. On the contrary, you will find them clothed in the attributes of servanthood, such as poverty, weakness, and humility. This is how you recognize the people of Allah. They know it is impossible to unite in their hearts both the love of this world and the search for the truth, because they know the reality of the here below. It is a veil that separates them from servanthood and divine proximity. That being said, how can you claim to follow the prophets and messengers when your heart is completely turned toward this world and you are preoccupied with its adornments? After adornment, what does the truth tell us about? He tells us about good provisions. What does it refer to? True nourishment is nothing other than food for the soul. In other words, it concerns the divine sciences, spiritual secrets, the lights of mercy, the stations of the Sunnah, and the degrees of ultimate reality. These are the good provisions that satisfy the arifin, the knowers of God. This is why the believers must follow the example of the knowers of God, who themselves follow the example of the best of creation, alayhi salatu wassalam. They must follow their inner behaviors, meaning their intentions, their niyyah, and their outer behaviors, meaning their actions, even if they do not understand their meanings. This is how they can attain the stations of faith. This prompts us to make a brief digression concerning the importance of purifying one's intention. The Messenger of God ﷺ tells us actions are based on intentions. If the believer does not conform to the inner behavior of the arifin, this would mean that he does not purify his niyyah, and consequently, that this niyyah is not fully directed towards God. In order for the intention to lead him to the secret of the actions, the intention must be sincerely lillah, sincerely for God. We do not sufficiently recognize the importance of intention. It is the source of everything and defines the action. If your intention is sincere, your faith will be firmly anchored in your heart. This reminds us of the famous story of a man who lacked religious knowledge but possessed complete sincerity and unwavering faith. When he heard the verse, "It is he who makes you travel on land and sea," he went to the sea with the firm intention of traveling on land and sea, that is, with the intention of walking on water, which he did. He did not accomplish this walking on water through acts of worship or good deeds. He accomplished it solely through the strength of his intention, his complete faith in God, and his absolute certainty in his word. Through this inner strength, he transcended his human limitations and the physical laws of this illusory world. This corresponds in our tariqah to the shadda reading of the divine name, which is the secret corresponding to the point above the alif of the name of God. Let us return to adornment and the patched cloak. Shaykh Buzidi says, "It is not incumbent upon us to impose the khirqa, the muraqqa, on everyone who wishes to affiliate with our way. As for the one who is commanded to wear the muraqqa, this is clear proof that he is endowed with great sincerity. Such a person will continually wear the muraqqa, giving it great ta'zeem, great reverence, knowing full well that the muraqqa allows one to abandon the here below which occupies the human heart. O you who denigrate the muraqqa and refuse to wear it, meditate on these words of Shaykh Buzidi. Your patched cloak is the tool that allows you to purify your heart from the love of the dunya. It is the weapon that allows you to fight your nafs in order to elevate yourself to spiritual heights, and you must sanctify it so that it accompanies you in knowledge of the real. But this is not what you do. You prefer to dress in beautiful clothes that flatter your nafs, and despite this, you hope to know the one who has the most beautiful names. If you want to know the truth, al-haq, you must understand that this knowledge is acquired through the science of opposites. The disciple must tend towards poverty without wealth, towards weakness without strength, towards humility without magnificence, towards generosity without greed, towards abasement without pride, and so on. If you wish to know the attributes of lordship, the attributes of rububiyyah, you must adorn yourself with the attributes of servanthood, ubudiyyah. If you refuse, then we will know that you are not counted among the truthful and sincere. We will know you are not counted among those who desire Allah alone, without partners. This is why we will no longer be able to guide you. Certainly, you will remain among the disciples, but you will see them all advance and surpass you one by one. Furthermore, you will not be permitted to wear the patched cloak, because it attests to the sainthood of the one who wears it. In other words, only one who has distanced himself from his passions may wear the patched cloak. If you refuse to manifest your servanthood by remaining attached to your vain desires, and you begin wearing the muraqqa, it will simply lead you away from the tariqah, because only one who sincerely loves God truly seeks Him. This is one of the reasons why your luminous inner vision, your basira, will be closed. That is, you will be cut off from witnessing the light. Whoever finds himself in this situation should not seek to guide his brothers towards the divine presence, even if he possesses characteristics of the people of God. If you do not see the light, then remain silent and do not claim that from which you are distant. If, on the other hand, you manage to adorn yourself with these attributes of servanthood, If wearing the muraqqa allows you to achieve spiritual elevation, then you will witness the opening of your basira, granting you the intuition, the firasa of believers. You will see your basira open and illuminated by the light of al-haq, through which you will realize the degrees of faith. Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu anhu reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, faith has over 70 branches or over 60 branches, the most excellent of which is the declaration that there is no God but Allah, la ilaha illallah, and the humblest of which is the removal of what is injurious from the path, and modesty is a branch of faith. As we have said before, there are some who deny the reality of the different readings in the Karkariya Sufi order. They believe there is only one reading, which would be that of the Ha, thus denying the other three letters of the divine name Allah. This hadith is a perfect answer for these people, since here the Prophet ﷺ speaks of the 70 branches of faith, that is, the 70 degrees of knowledge of God. These degrees refer to the 70 secrets hidden in the singular name Allah, within which the people of inner and outer Tajrīd journey. God says, so ask the people of dhikr if you know not. These degrees of faith are degrees of marifa, degrees of knowledge of Allah, and they can only be achieved through companionship with the guardian of this knowledge, the wali. Observe the words our Lord uses. He does not speak of the people of knowledge, in which case one could say this refers to all scholars of both the exoteric and the esoteric sciences. No, here God speaks of the people of dhikr. And who are they? They are those who surpass you in spiritual states, not merely in words and memorization. In other words, they are those who dwell in God's presence with their hearts, not just with their tongues. Their states have become dhikr for them, and when we see them, they remind us of God. These are the ones you must seek out if you truly want to elevate yourself in the divine presence. Why? Because from the one who speaks without any spiritual state, you will receive nothing but information. You cannot achieve spiritual elevation alongside them, since you can only receive from a person what they possess. Therefore, you must go to someone who has achieved divine proximity and whose entire life has become a dhikr of Allah. Through such companionship, you will learn disengagement, tajrīd, from this illusory world for attachment to the Lord of the universe. You will learn to be content with what God offers you and with His decree in all circumstances, even if it plunges you into extreme poverty, because you will know that in poverty lies proximity. You might wonder, how can poverty be a source of divine proximity? To understand this, you must remember that your nafs comes from your Lord, since it was born of the divine indblowing. This is why it desires the wealth of its source, which is al-ghani, the rich. This is why the human being, created from clay, must strive to humble the nafs by leading it to poverty. This is how you will taste the true meaning of al-ghani, because as we often remind, the reality of each thing is hidden in its opposite. Now is the moment to reflect on poverty, which is experienced by many disciples. It is a difficult situation that many face with varying degrees of acceptance and understanding. The best disciples are those who observe their material poverty with the eye of marifa, the eye of the direct knowledge of God, and are completely content with the situation, just as they are content with all the trials that befall them. Why? Because they know it all comes from the real and is a great benefit in their path. They are completely at peace, both internally and externally, and clearly this is the best position for the sincere seeker. O you who desires to achieve proximity, know that the love you have for this worldly life cuts you off from the love of God and His presence. Know that your quest for the goods of this material and illusory world distracts you from seeking the truth. Therefore, you must remove from your heart this love that you devote to this ephemeral worldly life. However, this is only possible if it is removed from your hand. This is precisely why God plunges you into poverty. He does so only out of love for you. He removes the veils of heedlessness that separate you from Him so that you can achieve proximity. When this love for the dunya is removed from your heart and no longer affects you, then it may return to your hand. This is what we learn through the lives of the great saints of our community. We have the example of Shaykh Abu Madian al-Ghawth, who was very wealthy and had to taste poverty. We also have the example of Imam Ashustari, who was the son of a great prince and lived in comfort. Yet he chose to abandon everything in order to seek out a realized Shaykh who could lead him to the knowledge of God. Upon reaching this master, the Shaykh handed him a staff and sent him to beg in the city markets. He had grown up in luxury, but now he needed to taste poverty in order to achieve spiritual realization, which he did with total submission, total taslim. And what of Sayyidina Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah envelop him with mercy, who was wealthy among his tribe, and later was found thanking God for his blessings when presented with a meal of water and salt. The fuqara, the disciples, react differently to poverty. Some are fully aware that their trial comes from God. They submit to the divine command and accept the test with satisfaction, but they go no further. In other words, they do not taste the deeper meanings nor realize what must be understood through this poverty. Yet, the spiritual path is a journey of knowledge, understanding, and realization of God. What use is the believer's trial if it does not allow him to heal his heart and achieve divine proximity? On the contrary, the disciple must live with complete realization everything that touches him without ever leaving his spiritual grave so that it may benefit him. There are other disciples who are struck by poverty and accept it outwardly. They submit to God and are patient in the face of the trials that befall them. Inwardly, however, they find it difficult to accept their situation, which makes them very unhappy. They do not understand why God tests them and do not seek to immerse themselves in this poverty with knowledge. Finally, there are disciples who lack knowledge and reject the trials. You see them praising their Lord when He places them in ease, but as soon as He plunges them into deprivation or poverty, they reject the divine decree and complain about their situation. Whoever does not show patience and contentment in these situations should know that he bears the traits of the disbelievers. Understand this. The sincere disciple must observe everything with the eye of divine knowledge and seek peace and satisfaction in their heart regarding the poverty that might reach them. This is why I have made spiritual walking, siyaha, an obligation in the tariqah and one of its foundations, because it is a sunnah left to us by the prophets and messengers, and it is indispensable for purifying one's heart and tasting the secrets. I myself have realized the immense benefits of siyaha, having journeyed throughout Morocco for over 10 years. When I left, I hadn't planned to stay 10 years. I hadn't even planned a return date or route or anything else. I simply ventured out to travel in the ocean of creation, whose waves correspond to the incredible spiritual states one must traverse. During this siyaha, I encountered many diverse personalities, the kind people usually avoid: thieves, alcoholics, beggars, and others. People dislike their company, yet these are the ones we must meet, get to know, accept, and above all, help, because through contact with them, we learn about humbling ourselves, poverty, and the humiliation of the nafs. By experiencing their lives, we realize their difficulties, and by spending time with them, we learn empathy. Only siyaha allows you to understand this. One who has not had this privilege will have a hardened heart. When seeing a prostitute, such a person might consider her a common sinner and turn away in disgust. However, one who knows poverty and humiliation will have an entirely different attitude. He will look upon her with the eye of mercy and consider her a creature superior to himself. He will see her as someone seeking repentance, struggling to work to feed her children. He could never exalt himself or show pride before her. Rather, he will see her as a tested, patient creature and will try to help her ease her difficulties. This is why we emphasize poverty's benefits for the disciple. If he manages to endure this apparent hardship with patience, contentment, and knowledge, then even if the entire world turns its back on him, he will remain at peace, knowing it all comes from God. If you want to know your spiritual level, hold fast to these 3 quotes. The Prophet ﷺ tells us, whomever Allah loves, He tests. He also says, whoever loves me, let him prepare for poverty. And finally, Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib says, if you want to know who is most pious, look where the arrows of the disbelievers go. Where do you stand in relation to these words? Consider what poverty may signify and observe the lives of Allah's people. You will understand that poverty and trials are outwardly difficult, demeaning, or even humiliating, but inwardly, they elevate the seeker, since the reward is nothing less than access to the knowledge of God. In this chapter on Tajrīd, disengagement from other than God, we have so far discussed the muraqqa and poverty. These are certainly not the only aspects. When seekers come to us, they are highly motivated. They seek the light and hope for khulwa, the spiritual retreat. Unfortunately, after much effort, some easily fall into laziness and gradually reduce their spiritual efforts, their mujahada. Their aspiration, their himma, diminishes alongside their spiritual efforts. They begin abandoning subrogatory acts, the nawafil. The voluntary prayers or fasting they used to practice become too burdensome and are abandoned. The same happens with their dhikr, then their daily Quran reading, and they sink into laziness until they return to the state of ordinary people. Without realizing it, the light diminishes in their hearts, and their understanding of spiritual secrets becomes less refined. They find themselves in a situation similar to one who has denied the path entirely. One to whom God has granted discernment will want to return to the level of mujahada he has lost, but despite his efforts, he cannot. He has great difficulty maintaining his Quranic wird, and it becomes impossible to maintain his voluntary prayers. He realizes that after abandoning them, they become much more difficult and burdensome for his nafs. The disciple finds himself in an unbearable situation. He feels ashamed and degraded. He feels he is not keeping his commitment to God and bears guilt for a great sin. In this regard, Imam Ibn Atallah Skandari says in his Hikam, a sin that brings you closer and returns you to your Lord is preferable to a good deed that fills you with pride. In this situation, the disciple will be in such a state of abasement and inner humiliation that he will repent of his laziness. If his repentance is sincere, God will accept it and make it easier for him to resume his spiritual efforts. Having tasted this state of humiliation, the faqir will ensure he never again abandons his daily spiritual efforts. O you who desires to be a true disciple, never abandon your spiritual effort. It is important to understand that spiritual efforts in the way were not established without reason. They are an obligation for anyone who wants to purify their heart, except for the one who has realized himself, that is, the one whose passion has become that of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wassalam. Unfortunately, these efforts frighten many people who deprive themselves of spiritual journeying. Many hesitate to embark on the path, saying, I like your tariqah, but it is too difficult for me. I am too weak. If you find yourself in this situation, do not use your nafs as an excuse to stray from your Lord's path. On the contrary, persevere, do your utmost, and you will see that God will make it easy for you. There are also people who come to this zawiyah expecting to find lessons in jurisprudence or creed, fiqh and aqidah. If you think you will find here detailed lessons on obligatory rules that validate prayer, you are mistaken. Instead, you will find the Shaykh reminding you of the prophetic hadith, prayer is light. You will hear him speak of prayer's deep, luminous meanings, and if you are sincere, he will direct you towards hidden and apparent spiritual efforts so you can rise to realize the state of the elite. And who are the elite? They are the people of spiritual taste, the people of apparent and hidden tajreed. The true Shaykh al-Tarbiyah, the educating Shaykh, does not wish to waste time further confining his disciples to intellectual concepts and rules. On the contrary, he wants to free them from these in order to lead them towards absolute oneness. His life is completely devoted to God, and whoever turns to him takes the path to God. If such a person is sincere, then following the Shaykh's example, his life will be totally oriented towards God. The Shaykh will not occupy him with worldly affairs. He will reserve this for other disciples who need the dunya to support their spiritual journey. This is why we have disciples who remain with the Shaykh to absorb the deep meanings, spiritual allusions, and secrets emanating from him. As for those not fully sincere in their quest, the Shaykh will ask them to work or study until complete sincerity and thirst for divine knowledge appear within them. Of course, we are not referring here to those who enter the tariqah with family responsibilities and employment. Why does the Shaykh act this way with the disciples? Simply because if he did not, very few fuqara would be able to endure the path's difficulties. It is necessary to advance gradually with them so they can spiritually elevate themselves. The sincere one who truly aspires to God is like one who undertakes siyaha. He leaves everything behind, keeping only what covers his awra, his private parts. For the rest, he entrusts himself entirely to God. By acting in this way, he will see his journey shortened. Why? Because you came to us to receive the handful of light that will prepare you to accomplish this spiritual journey, this inner voyage from your darkened nafs to the divine breath. You came to us to elevate yourself spiritually and realize divine knowledge and proximity. For this, you must free yourself from this lower world and extract it from your heart. The spiritual path resembles a siyaha. One who departs overburdened with baggage will face many difficulties. He will advance slowly, take frequent breaks, and develop blisters and muscle or joint pain. If he wants his pilgrimage to be quick and easy, he will lighten his load as much as possible. The same applies to suluk, spiritual wayfaring. The disciple's baggage symbolizes the riches and pleasures of this world, to which he desperately clings. These are genuine weights that slow his spiritual ascent and create many problems, yet surprisingly, he clings to them desperately. What you must generally understand is that love of this world is dangerous because it distances you from the way and Allah's light, leading some to even deny the Prophet's path of light. They deny it not because they disbelieve, but because they are too attached to the here below and refuse to detach from it. You think they doubt? But how could one who comes to the Shaykh to take the bay'ah and contemplate the light doubt what he sees? Doubt appears when there is uncertainty about something. But one who regularly sees the light, or even prophets or angels, possesses complete certainty. He knows perfectly what he has seen, just as when he sees his parents or friends, he does not doubt. So how could he doubt the vision of light? No, he does not doubt what he has seen. He knows perfectly well this tariqah is true, but decides to deny it because he is unwilling to sacrifice his nafs. He was accustomed to complete freedom and now finds himself having to wear prayer beads around his neck and dress in a patched cloak. He was used to eating refined dishes and now eats simple food. He was used to the comfort of his apartment or house and now must journey on siyaha, walking dozens of kilometers without money, sleeping on the street like one who is homeless. He was used to directing others and having people work for him. Now he must be humble and serve creation. This is the path of God, and this is what drives them to leave it. Those who see themselves as too weak are actually refusing to abandon what prevents them from purifying their hearts and elevating themselves spiritually. They largely act the same way as the previous one. After denying the tariqah, they begin finding excuses. Gradually, these excuses become insults towards disciples, then towards the Shaykh, until they become words of unprecedented weight, as they associate God's light with sorcery and therefore darkness. May God preserve us from this. Even in their personal approach, they do the same. Deceived by their nafs, they are convinced that they are being completely sincere towards God by leaving His path. Yet the first thing they do is shave their beards. They remove the clothes of piety, the muraqqa and the subha, and sometimes even the clothes of the sunnah. Their religious practices diminish significantly. They abandon the dhikr of God, delay their prayers, and no longer rise for night prayer. Shaykh Buzidi confirms our words, saying, "By God, I swear that only those who have disengaged themselves and freed themselves from the here below are those who have arrived, and they are very few." Arrival here means liberation from this world. But if you refuse to let go of it, if you cling to it, then no arrival is possible for you, and therefore, no spiritual realization. The sincere disciple who embarks on the path of inner purification must endure the difficulties, trials, and admonitions of his Shaykh, as these are part of spiritual education, tarbiyah. However, in paths that claim to be spiritual, the shuyukh spend their time praising their disciples and complimenting them constantly. You hear them tell their disciples that they are spiritual poles, aqtab, majdub, and descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. But that is not the Shaykh's role. He is not there to praise his disciples. The Shaykh's role is to lead his disciples to the extinction of their nafs and the realization of their total non-existence in the presence of al-haq, the truth. If he were to spend his time praising his disciples, he would produce the opposite result. He would push them towards affirming the nafs and lead them to pride and the illusion of individual merit. Those who claim the function of Shaykh and act this way only keep their disciples imprisoned by their nafs, which is a very serious matter. We regularly see the consequences of this in our zawiyah. Once, a man came intending to take the bay'ah and the light. When he presented himself before us, during our conversation, he asked us to confirm whether he was indeed one of the Ahlul Bayt, the prophetic household. We replied that no, he was not among the blessed descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. His reaction was astonishing. He asked us the question, and when we answered him truthfully, he refused the answer. Worse, he argued that his former Shaykh had told him that he was indeed from them, and because of this, he refused to take the light. This is where such empty praise leads. This man should have known that the lineage of the Prophet's household is known to all, but that the one who accesses the prophetic light also gains access to this lineage. Indeed, through the bay'ah and the descent of the star of light into the heart, he connects to the Muhammadan spirit, like Sayyidina Salman al-Farsi, about whom the Prophet ﷺ said, Salman is part of my family. What you must understand is that in the path of God, your spiritual success will come only through constantly humbling yourself. Regardless of your social position, material success, or anything else, it is through this that the Shaykh al-Kamil can properly plant the seeds of faith in the virgin soil that is the humbled and humiliated nafs. The Shaykh knows his disciples perfectly and knows how to deal with each one. When he sees good in one, he may sometimes be strict with him in order to encourage him not to slacken his efforts. There are others whom he may sometimes praise to motivate them and push them to work harder in God's path. He will thus nurture in their hearts love and modesty towards Allah and their Shaykh, so they can fully immerse themselves in the ocean of the Ha of divine identity until they see only Al-Haq, the real. Unfortunately, it may happen that a disciple misunderstands the Shaykh's intentions and relaxes, imagining he has reached full spiritual realization. This is how we recognize the people of perfect spiritual realization, Ahl Kamal. Indeed, the Ahl Kamal instead increase their acts of piety when they receive praise, for they manifest servanthood in the face of God's blessings. Fully aware that praise belongs only to the truth, they discharge themselves of all merit and abundantly thank their Lord, fearing they might be distanced from the ocean of haqiqah. As for the nafs which remains living, it is quite the opposite. It loves to hear praise, which sometimes causes its downfall because it takes pleasure in being complimented and even imagines it deserves such praise. The Shaykh will often correct his disciple harshly to shake him and test his sincerity in the tariqah. In this situation, the murid might be tempted to abandon the tariqah. This is a mistake. What he must do is not flee the Shaykh's education, but rather correct his nafs so it conforms to the will of the Shaykh at-Tarbiyah. This is why we swear that only few disciples succeed through praise while the nafs is still alive. Besides, what a strange thing it is to seek praise in the path of tarbiyah. The truthful disciple whose sincerity has burned away his existence does not see himself as worthy of receiving praise at all. Even if he were to give all of his possessions in charity, he would see no personal merit in it, for he knows that his individuality is only an illusion of the nafs. O you who seek to fade away and disappear in the presence of the real, beware of falling into the trap of praise. Anchor yourself in the vision of the light, and constantly respect proper conduct. Humble yourself, and reject any personal merit while seeking the death of the nafs. Remember that you have embarked on this path for one purpose, to burn the darkness of your soul in order to return to God's light. In other words, you have embarked on the path leading to the death of the nafs, which will only be effective when you become totally indifferent and impassive to both compliments and criticisms. At that moment, the sun of haqiqah will rise over your heart, so you will no longer be distracted by creation. Rather, you will remain turned towards your Creator, annihilated in His light. But if you still react to praise or admonishment, know that you will remain far from this state. This shows that you are still striving for Jamal, beauty, still yearning for paradise and fleeing from hell. You are worshiping God only through the prism of one of these opposites. Yet this is not what is expected of you. We expect you to unite the opposites, to free yourself from seeking paradise and fearing hell, so that you may achieve the purity of the heart. There are others who are even worse. They do not worship God out of fear of hell or love of paradise, but worship Him for the image that they will project to creation. Yet you are expected to completely burn the images of the physical and spiritual worlds, so that only the light of God remains. If you do not do this, you will always be cut off from divine knowledge and secrets. In our path, there are all types of disciples. There are those who advance in the science of talismans, those who learn the science of letters, others the science of the divine names, still others who advance with images and vision, and so on. But it is essential that you bring everything back to its origin. The talismans must be brought back to the stitched mass, ratq. The letters must be brought back to the alif. The divine names must be brought back to the singular name Allah. And the images must be brought back to the light. In reality, everything comes from the light. If you do not do this, you remain a prisoner of forms and are cut off from the source. This happens with many disciples. Some remain stuck with the images that they cannot transcend, while others have reached the stage where they journey only with the light. To illustrate this, let's consider three people making the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca. One travels by car, another by boat, and the third by plane. Once there, they complete their pilgrimage and then gather to discuss their respective journeys. The person who traveled by boat describes the endless stretches of water, long coastlines, large cities, great ports, and beautiful beaches they passed. The one who traveled by car describes the beauty of mountains, valleys, plains, rivers, towns, and countryside they traversed. Facing them, the person who took the plane explains they saw nothing but white clouds as far as the eye could see. White, white, and more white until reaching Mecca. In your opinion, which of these three would be the least tired from their journey, and above all, which would have the most peaceful and focused mind? Obviously, it would be the one who took the plane. The other two allowed themselves to be distracted by the physical forms of the world, and they arrived in Mecca with their heads full of images. During their tawaf, their circumambulation, they surely recalled their journeys, the landscapes they saw, and the adventures they experienced. This is why we say images are a fitna, a trial for them, distracting them from their objective of accomplishing the Hajj with full awareness and presence. In the spiritual journey, it is exactly the same, which is why we constantly repeat that the disciple must return to the light and burn all images, including his self. If he succeeds, he will join the rank of true human beings, those who have attained full spiritual realization. This is why you must empty your heart of everything that is not God. You must detach yourself from the vision of creation and from listening to all of their words in order to achieve peace of the soul and serenity. Shaykh Buzidi says, "He in whom there is love and desire to be complimented and discomfort in criticism, he who overflows with love for riches and hates poverty, he who shows attraction to power and magnificence while rejecting humiliation, he is anchored in the vision of creation and inclines toward it." Indeed, the disciple who is completely anchored in the vision of the ephemeral world is a prisoner of his nafs illusions. Why? Because he still considers creation and has not realized its annihilated character. One who has truly realized extinction no longer reacts to compliments or criticism, since he sees both as coming from one and the same divine name. Similarly, if someone insults or praises him, he will respond, "Yes, indeed," because he has extinguished his person and his entire universe in the Hadra, the divine presence. He becomes like a mirror reflecting creation, so that whoever insults him as misguided merely reveals their own misguidance. This is the difference between one who is in a state of total extinction and the one who persists through his nafs. This is why we can easily say that in truth, the faqir hates his shaykh, since as soon as the latter manifests constriction, qabd, against him, the disciple, seized with anger, distances himself. This shows that he still acts through his nafs. As for the shaykh, he hates no one, precisely because no sign of a lower degree of the nafs remains in him. He does not see the disciple's body or anything else, but sees him only in the form of light, a talisman, or even a divine name. He therefore cannot hate him. How could he who gave you the gift of God's light hate you? As an example, some disciples came to us requesting the bay'ah while drunk, and the shaykh never rejected them, but asked them to stay and sleep to sober up so they could take the bay'ah the next day with clear minds. Concerning the shaykh, you must understand that he can be gentle, kind, and smiling with his disciple one day and different the next, because the shaykh is the perfect mirror. He is the physical manifestation of the Muhammadan light, having completely extinguished himself in it until he became the Muhammadan inheritor of his time. The entire world is reflected in him, and one engaged in the spiritual path constantly contemplates his own reality through him. If observing this mirror you see love, then know you are the lover. If on the contrary you see something negative, know it is your own reality being revealed to you. The same applies to the disciples, the fuqara. They are the Shaykh's followers, part of him. They are those who saw the star of light descend and take up residence in their hearts until it pervaded their entire bodies, making them facets of this mirror. They too reflect on their own scale the world around them. When they wear the muraqqa, they outwardly clothe themselves in the colors of this world and reflect back to each part of the universe the corresponding color. But inwardly, they must be like water, without color, odor, form, or taste. Creation must no longer affect them. One who reaches this state truly deserves to be called an arif, a knower of God. Shaykh Buzidi says, the criticism of the common people is a gift for the people of Tasawwuf. What must be understood here is that not only is the Sufi untroubled by the words or insults of common people, but more than that, he seeks them out, hoping for the death of the nafs and inner purification. If common people were to leave him in peace, the Sufi would fear he was no longer on God's path, for he knows that the most tested among creation are the most beloved to God. As the Prophet ﷺ tells us, when Allah loves a servant, he tests him. You need only observe the lives of the prophets and see the terrible trials they endured. Look at Jesus with his companions, Abraham thrown into the fire, the Messenger of God ﷺ constantly insulted and humiliated by his people, a people who emptied an animal's entrails on him while he prostrated before his Lord, a people who waged war against him and tried to kill him. Where do you stand in relation to these examples? How do your trials compare to those of Allah's messengers? You are clearly very far from them, which proves your distance from the divine. The nafs ardently desires to be a wali, a qutub, a person with a high degree of spiritual realization, but simultaneously refuses to relinquish worldly goods. It wants to be elevated to the highest spiritual stations, but is unwilling to sacrifice anything. This is impossible, however, because one can only reach these stations by being completely emptied of all creation. How can you elevate yourself if the mere criticism of your wife or family can turn you away from the path? When we established the foundations of this blessed tariqah, my father, Mawlay Tayyib, did not understand why we practiced the siyaha or why we chose the muraqqa as our clothing. The same applies to my wife. She did not work for the tariqah from the beginning as you see today. It came with time. If you have difficulty getting your family to accept the tariqah, think of the Shaykh who had to establish it entirely despite much reluctance. Follow his example. He eventually saw his entire family follow him, including his wife, siblings, and even his parents, who themselves became his disciples. No one forced them. They came simply because they saw the truth through gentleness and good behavior. As for you, you're shocked to see your family oppose you, but look at your behavior. You act at home like an actual pharaoh. You never humble yourself. On the contrary, you try to impose your muraqqa on your entire family and place yourself in direct opposition to them. How can you expect them to one day accept the light and the tariqah? Who would accept that? If you want to bring your loved ones to accept this Sufi path of light, be gentle and always remain in Jamal, beauty, because inviting to God happens through your state, behavior, and example. It does not come through mere words or commands. If you want to bring your wife back to the path leading to Al-Haq, do not try to convince her with words, but set an example so she realizes what she's missing. You are not Abu Bakr, who woke his entire family every night to worship God. If your wife sleeps at night, leave her and attend to yourself and your relationship with God. Rise, perform your ablutions in the last third of the night, and immerse yourself in dhikr. Perhaps one day she will open her eyes at night and see you sitting beside the bed, invoking God with tears in your eyes. She will not understand what moves you and will fall back asleep, but by witnessing this scene regularly, she will one day ask about your practice. You will answer that you invoke your Lord while awaiting Fajr, and like the Messenger of God, ﷺ, you will say, should I not be a grateful servant? She may then experience a powerful spiritual state that makes her want to taste this love and gratitude for God's blessings, and she too will arise to worship God. If you cannot even call your own family to return to God, how can you hope to call people outside of your home? Look at the biography of the Prophet ﷺ. We see that the chosen one began with his own family, and the first to submit to Islam and follow him was none other than his loving wife, our mother Khadija, may Allah be pleased with her. To call to Islam and Ihsan, you must conduct yourself nobly, in a manner you have never displayed before. Even if your relatives hate you, it changes nothing, For if you are patient in the face of hardship and others' hatred, you will derive great benefit and taste the divine name As-Sabur, the patient one. We have many such examples among the pious. A hadith relates the story of a companion who was very poor and answered to the nickname Abu Damdam. He had detached himself from creation to the point of being completely indifferent to both insults and compliments. When leaving his house, he would say, "O my Lord, I have forgiven all of creation." One day, while the Prophet ﷺ was in Mi'raj, he saw angels arguing over a sadaqah, a charity, and asked them about it. The angels replied, "It was a charity from Abu Damdam." The chosen one ﷺ went to question his companion about the sadaqah, and he replied, "O Messenger of God, I have nothing to offer in charity, but every morning when I leave my house, I tell my Lord that I forgive all of creation." Abu Damdam was poor and despised by all, but he despised no one. On the contrary, he awaited in silence and forgave all creation daily, knowing that existence comes only through God. We have another example in Sayyidina Musa (alayhi) and his brother Harun. God says, "Go forth, thou and thy brother, with my signs, and tire not in the remembrance of me. Go, both of you, unto Pharaoh. Truly he has rebelled. Yet speak unto him gently, that haply he may remember or have fear." They said, "Our Lord, truly we fear that he will deal hastily with us, or that he will transgress." He said, "Fear not. Truly I am with you twain. I hear and I see." When God asked them to go to Pharaoh to convey his message, they feared the Egyptian ruler's display of power and majesty, but Al-Haq reassured them. The two prophets went to bring people back to the worship of God. This is why they were patient in the face of mockery, difficulties, and the chilling threats from a Pharaoh who openly claimed divinity, exclaiming, "I am your Lord, the Most High." This is the example our shuyukh follow. As with Sayyidina Musa (alayhi), the Shaykh sends his disciple to be humiliated by creation so he can detach from the nafs, which in reality corresponds to Pharaoh. Through this abasement and humiliation, the murid tastes elevation to the heights of the spirit. Why does this nafs correspond to Pharaoh? Because it is proud, refusing to lower itself or be lowered by anyone. It claims lordship in such a subtle, hidden way that the disciple does not realize it. It is essential to free oneself from it, and to achieve this, constant spiritual effort is absolutely necessary. As we have already said, among the signs of the naf's death is that the disciple devotes himself to more acts of worship without deriving any personal merit. He multiplies prayers, fasts extensively, gives his money in charity without taking pride in any of this, and when he performs a good deed, he immediately forgets it. This is a clear sign of his sincerity. God says, "Whosoever desires might, to God belongs might altogether. Unto him ascends the good word, and he uplifts the righteous deed. As for those who plot evil deeds, theirs shall be a severe punishment, and their plotting shall come to ruin." O you who claim divine love, you who claim complete sincerity, search your heart with the light, and see if these characteristics are present in you. If you want to reach the elevated spiritual levels where you will know that God has accepted you, then know this requires divesting yourself of this lower world and your own nafs. Why do you think Sufis have always sought asceticism, zuhud? Simply because they know that the love of the dunya is a trap that can hold you back, despite your search for God. If you still have in your heart love for this physical and material world, know that you have married the daughter of Iblis, and he never abandons his son-in-law. On the other hand, if you leave this lower world and rise on the straight path, taking your qareen with you, you will then be able to marry the dunya without her having any influence on your heart. This is only possible through elevation in all the readings of the name of Allah. So take care of yourself and preserve your path. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد.